Cool. Hey everybody, this is Chris Shang, and today we've got a pair of brothers that are guests here. They're co-founders of VIO Med Spa, which is a franchised business now, but we have Nicholas and we've got Joe. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you guys individually, what you guys are about, how you guys decided to start the company.
Yeah.
All right,
I'll
Nick,
let
Nick, want to go ahead?
No, you go first.
Yeah. So I'm my first business was dry cleaning. I got into that about when I was like 23, 24 years old. Quickly realized that I needed to do something that wasn't so much on hands, if you will. I didn't know anything about the industry, so I quickly learned how to run a boiler and do all these other things, and I needed to get out of that really quick. So then I went into tanning, got into the tanning business because it was more sales oriented. I was really good with sales, so I knew I would do really well with that. Scaled that to 3 locations, and then I was approached by one of my customers to open a med spa or open a laser hair removal spot. So from there, I reached out to a friend of mine that was in the industry. He told me a little bit about it to save costs and everything, and to avoid having to get another, retail front. I just put it in the back of my tanning salon. So I ran out of my back of my tanning salon for a good about a year and a half or so, and then from there, Nick and I scaled it up from there.
Yeah. And so just a quick, my background, I told you a little bit about it when we jumped on the call. So my background is in IT consulting. I kind of grew up in the consulting world. Definitely not your typical entrepreneur, if you would even call me that, right? I'm probably the least risk person that Joe will even say the same thing. I'm just not a risky person. And then, in 2017, when Joe had this med spa, I decided, hey, this is a really viable business, obviously, right? It's doing well. It's performing month over month, and it just continues to grow from an industry perspective. And he wanted to actually open up another location. And at that point, we were like, does it make sense to put, $800 to $1 million into a new spa, or does it make sense to kind of build some of this legacy piece of things where we're actually going to now turn it over and say, let's franchise it. Let's get our name out there on a national brand. And he happened to, I don't know, maybe a month or two after that, happened to meet these fellas from this company called Apex. The guy's name's Ryan Rayo and Ryan Rose, and met these fellows from there that were actually a franchise development company. And so it took about a year to build the franchise. And we started off, with this whole concept of called Skin Deep. We couldn't actually use that name because we couldn't trademark it. And then, there's a whole story about how the name came up. Joe could tell you about it. But from there, from 2017 to 2018, it took us to develop the whole franchise model. And then in 2018, we sold our first franchise to Jacksonville. And then Joe and I actually happened to be the second franchisees of the franchise brand. And that was in Fairlawn, Ohio. So, and then from there, it's now 50 plus locations. There's well over 250 sold, and it just continues to kind of grow from there.
Interesting. How did you guys decide to, I guess was the franchising model the way that you had in mind to scale the business, or was that almost like serendipitous in the fact that all these things aligned by meeting these guys and then discovering that was probably the best path forward?
That's exactly what happened. It was definitely once they kind of laid out exactly how it would all look and how we could actually grow the brand much quicker than doing it, one location at a time. It made more sense to do that. So, and with their network, everything just kind of played them into one. One of the guys that they worked with was in beauty and things like that, and he helped grow European Wax Center. So it kind of just organically made sense for us to do it that way.
Yeah, right. And aside from that too, I didn't realize this when he did it. I'm like, oh man, franchising, I don't know, does that make sense or whatever? And I didn't realize this, but most retail brands that you see in strip malls and all of these different types of locations, they're all franchises, right? Yeah. There's so many franchises out there. And then like Joe said, you realize kind of what the net value can be at the end of the day and how you can kind of grow this brand to a national brand and become a nationally known, nationally recognized brand quickly. And that franchising is the way to do that. So yeah, it was serendipitous, but it was also at the same time a little bit strategy in there to make sure that we can get to where you wanted to be.
Got it. Very cool. So it seems like Joe, you've kind of been like this scrappy entrepreneur guy, and then kind of this opportunity developed, and Joe kind of brought in the business hat a little bit. Um, that being said, though, I'm sure you both have had to wear multiple hats as co-founders of this business. What's been some of the things that you've encountered along the way that, and I'm sure you guys both have different answers to this, but like that either like met, exceeded, or completely like missed expectations?
Well, the growth part of it was, it's a weird question to ask, right? Because COVID threw a big wrench for everything into us, right? So at first, everything was going great. And, one thing that like I was really adamant about, I loved our design. But when we look at the reality of things, they're like, well, we can't grow it the way it looks right now. We have to grow a new look that's fresh and more Western based that people can grow into and the brand can grow into with longevity. And that was one thing. And then when you hit COVID, there was a lot of people fearing, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with COVID? Are people going to have money to do these things? And so a lot of our franchisees were really nervous. And that threw a big wrench in us. And like you said, we had all wear numerous different hats. I stopped taking a pay. Nick was working his full-time job. We all wore numerous hats to keep this thing bootstrapped and running. So there's a lot of risk on all of our parts, but we made the best out of it. And there was a lot of internal, arguments, but we're all like family. Like all of our partners, we're all like family, and that's important in business, and that's how you survive. So
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, COVID, huge wrench, right? We opened up Fairlawn in February of 2020. A month later, shut it down, right? Just spent, $800,000 building out this med spa. And a month after we opened, we shut it down. And so I'm sitting here, I'm in, again, I do IT consulting. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, this is not good. Right. And Joe kept saying it's not the same as it's not going to be what you think it's going to be in terms of, this is beauty. Right. So people want to look good. And it just so happened in that revelation of COVID, it was like everybody was started to be on these video calls like we're doing here. And everybody wanted to look good. They start looking at themselves like, damn, I got a lot of wrinkles, or, oh man, I got acne, or whatever it might be. And they really wanted to look good on camera. And so it actually started to have this effect of, well, it didn't create this COVID effect of a negative COVID effect. It actually was positive. And so once we started to open the doors again, VIO as a whole really saw major growth. And actually we had several, including our top franchisee, open up in COVID, masks and all, and they excelled. And so it just goes to show you that this brand is resilient, and I say this industry as well is resilient. And then, like Joe said, when we all kind of wore different hats at that same time, right at the end of 2020, I ended up having to go in. We ended up having to, part ways with the manager at the time, and I jumped in as a manager at a med spa, which I had no background in at all, and had to figure out how to run it, how to learn the business at the actual retail level, not just kind of at the numbers level, which is where I typically am better at. And, it all worked out for the best, right? Things start to grow and you start to figure it out. And as a group, you make things work. So.
Yeah, I mean, to that point though, I would say like, do you feel like you guys doing this as brothers has kind of helped? You talked about Joe, family. You also alluded to arguments and a little bit of
arguments like you would not believe. I mean, I wanted to murder him every 2 weeks for the past 5 years. I wanted to murder him. But you know what? You're brothers at the end of the day, and like you have to like talk each other down, and you have to be there for one another in order for the business to work. And that's kind of how it works. And it makes you closer, it makes you stronger, and you grow from there. Now, I will say this: we have some partners that didn't make it all the way because egos and everything else. They think they know everything, and just because you may have done successful in one business doesn't mean that you're going to the best in another business. And sometimes their egos got in a place of that. And Nick and I were put in some really sticky situations in the sense of when you're growing and you have this business, and maybe it's too much information, but you're being honest, right? Sometimes people that come in with more money try to push you out, and that's unfortunate. And you just got to stay strong and keep your core and just keep chugging away. And that's what we did, and we prevailed, and we grew the core group of guys that we started with the exception of like 3, stuck with it, and we're reaping the rewards right now.
Yeah. And funny, and Joe says, he had arguments. I think even just like and then he talked about kind of talking people off the ledge a little bit too, is even up till Friday. I mean, Joe's over talking me off the ledge, just like certain things. Right. And so as much as we argued, there's also a lot of that camaraderie where you're kind of helping each other out and work through different tough tasks. Right. And the other side of it is Joe alluded to some partners, right? There's partners out there, and Joe and I. So before this, we started another tech company, and as a part of that, we dealt with a bad partner, and that partner had said one thing to me. He was like, he did something, and as a part of his deposition, he was like, I did this because I knew that they couldn't do it, right? And so that fired me off to be able to. I did it, right? I ended up doing something because he said I couldn't do it, and it was similar to this. We had partners that were like, well, we know you can't do it. And I was like, oh, hold my beer. You know what I mean? Like, we'll make it work. And
literally, so there was a guy, I'll just say who it is. I mean, I'm without saying it, but one of the founders from a big company with an orange company that's named after a fitness brand, he basically said, well, this business is going to fail after COVID. I've been in retail my whole life. And I'm like, well, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but you're wrong. I know this business. I know you're wrong. We'll get you every penny of yours back to you, and you can leave. And you know what? I hate to say it, but it's probably one of his biggest mistakes in his life. And one of our other partners, again, his ego is too big, and people just don't believe, and that's the problem. They think they know more than everyone else in the room, and we're passionate people, so they play on that, right? And you just got to stick to your gut and just keep chugging away. No, if you know what's right, you got to keep going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part I feel like being brothers probably helps with the perseverance part of it, even though you guys are probably arguing against one another, like to be able to talk each other off the ledge or like have that partnership that's thicker than anything else probably helps a lot in terms of like having the wherewithal where, I could imagine a lot of other solo founders or like, founders that don't have that relationship where they would probably not have enough thick skin to kind of like stomach through some of the stuff that you guys are just talking about, right? So yeah, I mean, like kind of coming out of COVID, being able to like flip the script on that and like see accelerated growth during a tough time period in a service business, given that I know beauty can tend to be more of a like resilient industry, through tougher times, economic times. But that said,
Yeah.
still has to come down to you guys building a brand from the ground up. So that being said, like where's the business now today? Obviously encountered some challenges, overcome a lot of those. But where's the business today? Where are you guys hoping to take it in the near future?
Nick, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So
Nick's a number guy, so Nick can tell you all the numbers and everything.
yeah, I mean, so some things we're not allowed to share, obviously, but we're well over 50 locations active and open right now. By the end of the year, I think we should have a little bit, upwards of 60, close to 60. So there's several more openings happening over the next 2 months, or I guess it's more like 7 weeks at this point. Joe and I actually just opened up another location about 2 weeks ago in Ray Farms in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we have 2 in North Carolina already. But yeah, so close to 60 this year, hopefully between anywhere 80 to 90 by the end of next year as well. And, with the new private equity company, Friedman Spogli, there's a lot of growth that's going to be happening, not only with the actual numbers of the spa, but actually internal to the corporation itself, where we're going to have a lot more team members to be able to go out and assist these franchisees and get opening. One of the biggest challenges that VIO faces, obviously, is good retail space, right? And so finding good retail space is going to be important, and that's what we're going to use a lot of the resources for, as well as finding the right franchisees and coaching the franchisees and all of that. So I think I said it earlier, but we have well over 250 locations that are sold, and they're going to be in active development. So over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, and then in the next 5 years, I'd say, our goal is to have well over, 300 to 400 locations. Right. And so it just depends on where we're going to be at that particular time and how long it takes to open and all these different aspects. But, we want to grow this to a national brand across all 50 states. I think we're in, like, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, like 22 or 25 states.
Yeah, I
Something
think
like that.
22 states now.
Yeah. So, just try to grow this to 50 states if we can, and beyond from there. So.
Awesome stuff. Um, any advice or notes you would give to like aspiring entrepreneurs that are, looking to grow their own kind of like service businesses and try to scale it up? Obviously, you guys already mentioned and alluded to some of the growing pains involved, but like, what were some of maybe like the soft skills associated to each of you guys to help you overcome some of those things?
So Joe and I probably have two different
Yeah.
aspects to this. So Joe, you go first. I bet you we have two different, not different opinions totally, but my view on things is a lot different than Joe. Joe's a head first, let's go, doesn't care what's underneath the water, and I'm a little bit more like, let me dip my toes in first and let's see what happens. So Joe, you go first.
Yeah, so like the way I've always done things, and this is, I think, everyone in my family off because I just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, can't you just stick to what you're doing? But like, I'm just very ambitious, and I kind of just like Nick said, I just jump in the water and I figure things out. So you first have to figure out, which one to open first, right? And then you have to figure out, is it a viable business that you can actually scale? Because if you can't scale it, there's no point in doing it. There's no point in just having one location because that's only going to generate so much money, right? So, my brain's always going with new ideas. I think I pitch Nick 2 different ideas a week of things I still want to do. I can't stop thinking of ideas, right? But you have to stick with one, and you like just stick with it, take the risk and do it. Whatever that risk is. When I first opened VIO, or Skin Deep rather, I didn't even have the money to do it. I leveraged my tanning. You can't do this today, but I leveraged beds that I had not even paid off to get the money to buy new lasers, and I just kind of figured things out. Do I recommend that? No, but definitely have a strategy in place where you're going to have the money, where you can pay that debt service and continuously grow. And like I said, the biggest advice I could give to somebody is just take the risk and do it. Because if you keep thinking about it, you're never going to do it. You're going to find more and more reasons to talk yourself out of doing it and why you shouldn't do it than why you should do it, which is why you thought of the reason in the first place.
So to add to that, so my mentality is not a head first mentality, but let's just assume it's a head first mentality. I think the biggest thing is know the business, right? Know the business inside and out, become a student of the game, and really take the time to learn what's going on. Know your costs, know your expenses, know how you're going to make revenue, and know the marketing, right? You have to be a jack of all trades. I grew up, as I said, in the technology world, and so marketing and sales were not something I am good at, and I still to this day still am trying to learn, right? So trying to better yourself in ways that you didn't before is going to be the most important part of it. And then really kind of, I guess, owning your actions and taking responsibility for all the actions that you take, whether good or bad, right? So there's a lot of people out there that are going to try to blame others. Oh, it was their fault because we lost money, or it was their fault because we lost money. In reality, whoever is making the decisions is the person that, you have to own it, right? You have to own when you're right or wrong. And then
I will comment on that. Nick does not sugarcoat it to even me. Like, I was bitching about stuff in the past, and he's like, "Look, you chose that lifestyle. You chose to be a boss. You chose you want to do this. I don't want to hear it. No sympathy, nothing. But you know what? As much as I bitch about it today, you do need that tough love. You do need it because it just pushes you more to work harder. Bottom line, end of the day, it does. Nick is ruthless when it comes to that, but at the same time, I love him for it, But
yeah.
so
Yeah, and honestly too, so as I said, I don't dive in head first, right? So I have a full-time job, and everybody wants to go and talk about the hustle, and the hustle is key, right? And just because you may not be making money right off the bat doesn't mean you can't still survive life, right? There are ways to do both and hustle, in my opinion. I was not as fortunate to be able to do that. And I say that because by the time we started this business, as an example, I had one kid, just got married, just bought a house. You know, I did all the whole family thing, and it's not as easy to do that, right? And I chose to have my wife stay home to be able to stay with the kids and things like that. So I have to provide. So the hustle becomes real at that point when you actually have to dive in and do multiple things. And to this day, I still do multiple things. So I'm running 4 spas and I still work a full-time job. And mostly now, I think we talked about this in the beginning, Chris, was the full-time job is not a necessity at this point, right? It's more of like, I actually I really like my job, but at the same time, I don't know what I would do if I'm not continuously busy. I think I've learned to be busy. And I think that is just kind of something I've grown to love. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to, one day part ways with that and really focus and dive in headfirst into VIO. But right now it's working. Right. And so I'm okay with that. But so a different perspective than your true entrepreneur who would be Joe, right? That word drives me crazy, by the way. I think nowadays entrepreneur to a lot of people means I don't have a job and I'm trying to figure out life. And it's not really the folks that are actually trying to make a difference in the economy and jobs and all that sort of thing, right? So to me, entrepreneur has a totally different word, but um, yeah, I think it's totally different from my perspective to Joe's, but both are viable. And I think that, if you're out there trying to figure out what's going on, it's all about the grind. You gotta hustle, you gotta stay humble, and I think things start to come together eventually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to add on to that, like when Nick, you don't know what work is until you fully go in. And Nick, our parents were great parents, but we weren't fortunate enough to have them, give us money to start our businesses. Like I said, we bootstrapped the hell out of every business I started. We bootstrapped the hell out of everything. With my first business, I got screwed over by a guy who gave me bad equipment for my dry cleaner. I was basically eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 5 years. But you know what? That's the fact. And then I was picking up employees at their houses just to make sure they came to work. Like when you open a business, you put everything on the line, and you when you're backed up against a corner, you work your ass off even harder, and that's when you learn what hustle is, and you don't forget that, and then it's entrenched in your body from that point.
Yeah, and actually, I read a quote today, and it said something like, "If you're not willing to let go of your lifestyle or something like this for 1 year, then you don't deserve to have the lifestyle you want for the rest of your life," or something of this sort, right? And it just says basically like you have to be willing to give up things that you really really want. So I know Joe for many years didn't go on family vacations and do these types of things, right? You have to give up the stuff that you really want to do in order to have the life that you really want for the rest of your life, right? So hustle hard,
Yeah.
stay humble.
Yeah. Not a lot of people willing to make those short-term sacrifices for the
Yeah.
long-term gains.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Love tourists out there for sure.
Yep.
Um, that said, want to say thank you guys so much for taking the time, sharing your guys' story journey. Super passionate and just very insightful and very inspiring, especially for I think like you guys go back to like that scrappy, like bootstrap kind of just, pull things up by your own boots kind of mentality. And I love the fact that you guys are brothers and that it seems like there's a lot more pros than cons in terms of like how you guys have been able to leverage that relationship in business.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One
we
other
feed
one
off each
other
other. The energy feeds off each other, and you push one another to
You can
like
tell.
want more and more and more.
Yeah, one other thing I will say to aspiring entrepreneurs, as you asked, is stay true to the handshake. So whatever you promise to somebody that you're going to do, definitely do it. That goes a long way. When you start to breach that conversation that happened on a handshake, that's when things start to go negative. Joe and I have experienced numerous, as Joe alluded to earlier, numerous bad partners, and that's the reason you have to have an agreement in place, right? However, I will say that there's 3 of us for sure. My brother Joe, and this fella named Harish Kakarala. We've done so many businesses together and legitimately have done them on a handshake, and nothing by no means other than that. It's just that's how it happened before the actual agreement came into place, right? Obviously, you have to have an agreement in place for taxes and things like this to make sure that you have evidence of all that, but the handshake and the money and all this actions happened well before all of that. And I can tell you to this day that I would give you know, I think in my wedding, a friend of mine had said, you know, the $10,000 friend or something like this, it's somebody that you'd be able to give $10,000 to. Doesn't matter who it is and what it's for. It's just, you have trust that they're going to spend it right and do something right with it. Right. And that's exactly Joe. That's exactly Harish. And in that whole, you know, we call it the trident circle here, or the trident, right? You're able to trust that that person's going to do what you want them to do. And they have a good idea to spend that money. So stay true to the handshake. Obviously you need, you know, agreements where you need them, but definitely, you know, hold true to your values.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thanks for having
it.
us.
Thank you so much.
Of course.